Hi, I'm Chong Khee, and I'm very excited to have with me today two amazing artists from the Once and Future creative team. So we have Stanley Dodds, who's the conductor, and we have Anandi Bhattacharya, who's the librettist as well as the vocal soloist. Stanley is actually calling in from Germany and Anandi is calling in from India, so you can get a sense of how multinational the Once and Future creative team is. And this is perhaps a good point in time to ask the both of you. How and when were you first approached to be involved in the project, and what drew you to say yes? Maybe Stanley, would you like to go first?
Sure. Look, I know the composer actually, Eugene. I've known him for several years, and in an altogether different set of circumstances, I actually know one of the producers as well, Topi Leetipu. Topi was and still is, I suppose, a concert tenor. And in that capacity, he performed with the Berliner Philharmoniker on numerous occasions. So I knew we didn't perhaps speak so much, but certainly our paths had crossed. And then again, in an unrelated project, through a common friend, I got to know Eugene Biermann. And this was, I think, a good 2 to 3 years ago. So that my sense of time's become a little bit distorted, I think, because of Corona. You know, it's what happens when time stands still for about 2 years. So it could be 3 or 4 years for all I know. But I knew of him as a composer and I knew his work, and he made the proposal to me that he was working on a project that would integrate many different artistic disciplines, live music and art film, and almost philosophical subject matter, and performance laser, and also vocal singing. And I mean, I'm a musician that I do many different things in my musical life. I'm a violinist, I'm a conductor, and I'm also a manager in the orchestral world. But I do have a particular passion for contemporary music and contemporary arts projects, and in particular the intersection between media and music. And that's why when he mentioned it, I literally jumped at it, and have been on board since.
That's really interesting. Anandi, what about you? What drew you to say yes?
Everything about it, if I'm being very honest. I think it was just a very ordinary day back in India, and as a performer and soloist, let's say a year ago, the pandemic was kind of drawing to an end. And like many performers all over the world, I was very uncertain of what the future was bringing for me as an artist. And I suddenly get a message on Instagram, actually, from the producer for the coordination and everything, Lauren Corvania, writing from Dr. Eugene Biermann on behalf of him. And I think it was just super surreal to be approached for this project, because it came to me out of nowhere. It came to me absolutely out of nowhere. I could not have imagined at all being in this place. And I think at the very onset I had a lot of questions for Eugene, like why for this project, you know, and slowly it kind of made sense. It still feels super surreal, super extraordinary, wonderful as the project is, of course, but who would not say yes to this project as a soloist? My question to you. But you know, it's just I think I feel very privileged to have been found for this, and super honored that I'm considered to be, the soloist for this. And yeah.
Yeah, I'm really curious about the kinds of questions that you had for Eugene, because I think when I was listening to your videos on YouTube, I was really struck by like the incredibly transcendental quality of your voice, and I feel like I really understood why they approached you to be the voice of the AI in the piece, right? And at the same time, when I watch you perform, you are very, very alive, you're very warm, you're very friendly, and I was also then wondering how you were able to, was it a challenge for you to try and articulate the voice of an AI in the writing of the librettos, or was that something that you felt like, no, I'm quite happy to just jump into it and negotiate that with Eugene?
Well, I mean, I am the most technologically challenged human there ever was and is perhaps on the planet. I think technology breaks down around me. So I think for me it was a very big irony to be in the role of an AI. But also coming to the writing of the lyrics part, which was, I think, super, super fascinating for me to do, where I was given like 100% freedom by not only Eugene but also Chris, while very delicately sort of navigated the content that Chris had put together for the film, which is also a very big part of the performance. I think it was super amazing just looking at the dichotomy that is, I'm actually a very vulnerable person in general. Like I think I'm super open, and there's very few things about me that's robotic or rational. So it's very interesting, and I think what really worked in a very imaginative and fictional way is for the AI to have that quality because of me, because I'm playing that part. It's the AI is super philosophical, right? Because the whole thing is about humanity starting over in a new planet or in a new situation and spectrum. And so, to have written this very nostalgic and definitely quite morbid, if I may use the word, of even imagining the end of humanity in its singular forms, in its individual, experiences, and have only an amalgamation of all of its feelings and experiences. I mean, at the very onset, I didn't even know where to start. Like, I was like, where do I start writing from? How do I tell the beginning of the story? And I think also having so much freedom and so much support that, yay, you're doing great, was such a, it was super unexpected, because I was like, maybe I'm doing this completely wrong from the very beginning, but somehow it worked out. And I think at the very end we also had a chat about AI and music yesterday at the Hong Kong Baptist University, about so many technical aspects, but I think my role was to give a completely fictional and imaginative description of what an AI would be if it was really in charge of, carrying on to another, let's say, even multiverse or whatever, the having the responsibility of like beginning again, the epitome of its human perceptions, while still not being able to feel and emote, but still achieving the best possible emotional intelligence it could possibly gather just by perception, but not actual feeling, which is a very interesting space, I think. Sorry if I didn't make sense. I hope I made sense. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think I'm really picking up on how you were given a lot of freedom in the kind of creative interpretation of what the AI character might be like. And I feel like I can really see that in the writing as well, that it was surprisingly very vulnerable and warm in those ways. And that was something that was, I think, that made me reflect on my own perceptions about what AI is, right? There is a more conventional notion of AIs as being cold and artificial, and there's also that kind of the uncanny valley, right? That point at which you're kind of, oh, it's human, but not quite human, and then how do we how do we negotiate with that? And when I look at the writing for the librettos, I'm like, this feels like a person. It doesn't quite feel like an AI. It really feels like the AI is just another person. And that's also interesting to think of how the totality of everyone's human experiences being in an AI maybe imparts a certain human quality also to that particular AI in the once and future. And talking about philosophy, I'm also thinking about how, with orchestras and ensembles, it feels like the way I think about a conductor is the ability to pull together all these different diverse strands, all these different musicians with maybe their own styles of playing, their own preferences into something that is coherent or that is able to translate to something beyond each part of it, right? And I'm then wondering if, Stanley, you could talk a little bit about, your work with the Zimu Ensemble, which I understand was just founded by you earlier this year, actually, and how you are approaching your work with them in light of the themes of the once and future.
Yeah, well, thanks, Khee, and thanks, Anandi. For me, you see, it's really fascinating. I don't know if the viewers know this, but Anandi and I have only just met for the first time now here at this talk. So for me, it's actually also equally fascinating to hear you talk about the creative process, because you are, after all, the librettist. You've written the words that go to this piece of music, and that is, of course, a key part of any vocal work, is the libretto, which is then set to music and sung. I mean, my role as a conductor, in the end, I think you can see it very much as an organizational role in a way, because as far as each of the players are concerned, we have 12 players, and they're members of the Berliner Philharmoniker, so instrumental players really of the absolutely highest level. They have each of them a part to play in the contemporary idiom, which involves special technique. So it's not something that, and they're not necessarily playing styles that they would use in, let's say, their everyday work in more classical symphonic repertoire. But that's the exciting thing about it, because these are new sounds. It's a new sonic universe that's being created. Eugene has a bit of a tendency to write very extreme things for the instruments too. He loves either end of the instrumental spectrum, very low, very high. So these contribute also, I think, to an otherworldly effect. But my job, actually, in a project like this, is we have this really spectacular film by Chris Yeo, and I've just received one of the final versions now with the colour grading and in the final edits, because it's important for me now, and also surely for Anandi, to work together with the film, because after all, when we go out on stage and somebody presses play, then that film will always run identically from version to version. And I have in front of me 12 live musicians, 13. Anandi's there too, and she's not AI, she's very much alive. And so the thing is that I have to keep that time elapsed on the film in some type of relation to what's happening on stage. And I'm grateful in a way that it's quite generous. I've done different types of work accompanying films before, and it can get very, very complex in timing things to get the film. But this is, I think, when you see the film, you understand. It tells the story. It tells almost a poem in a series of images, which, for the best part, remain without dialogue. So it retains in some way some of the universal quality of music, in that it doesn't actually resort to dialogue to tell stories. And the voice of the AI is also commenting that then from actually outside. So these, you might say, these are all memories of what it was like to be, I mean, literally of the flesh. And I think this is so when you talk about, what would an AI be if you took away the sensual nature of our existence? That is a very interesting question. And I think for myself, I'm I'm absolutely aware of the fact that whatever might come in an afterlife, I'm not convinced that the sensual side of it will be there, so you better enjoy it while you're here, is what I think. And this film actually just takes that up and looks at it. Indeed, I mean, the key word here is in the flesh. And what does that mean? And how many facets of there are there? And how are some of these questions reflected in life, in our behaviour, in the rituals of life, but also in art? I mean, I think the incorporation of some artists in the film and how they reflect actually some of it. There are beautiful connections made in the film. And I'm very, very impressed with that work of art. And so my job, as I said before, it's an organisational one. I have musicians. We will work on the score. We'll get all the sounds right. And Anandi and I will have to have some lengthier discussions about how to coordinate what it is we do. But I think Anandi has a lot of freedom with the way that she can sing it. I think the improvisation is also an important part of it. And we will work out how we communicate what she needs from me, and then how I'll do that with her. And as I said, my job will be to make sure in each performance that the music stays within a certain proximity to the film, so that we don't have the situation that the film ends and the music is still going for another 20 minutes. That would be a bit embarrassing, and it won't happen, I promise.
I'm sure it won't. I did want to pick up on the note of the Zimu ensemble, though. Could you share a little bit more about what prompted you to create this, to found this ensemble? I wanted to come back to that note about the Zimu ensemble, and I'm very curious about what prompted you to want to found it. And also, you spoke a lot about the preparation in terms of what seems to me more technical terms, right? And I was wondering if part of the preparation with the ensemble would actually be to talk about the themes of the once and future. Is that something that is also part of the way you would prepare to work together with the ensemble?
The Xenu ensemble I founded earlier this year, or the end of last year, and it'd been a long wish of mine to create a contemporary music ensemble or even festival. And the name itself, Emu Ensemble, I mean, if you look at our logo, you see an emu, and as you might be able to hear, I come from Australia, so the emu has a particular relevance. And then it's got black and white stripes like a zebra or a zebra. So I called it Zemu, but actually it comes from the German words Zeitgenössische Musik, and it takes the first two letters from each of those words, Z-E-M-U, hence the capital. And Zeitgenössische Musik means nothing more than contemporary music. So it really is, it's a contemporary music ensemble. It's what it is, it's a very flexible ensemble, and this is the first project. So in some ways you could say I founded it for this project, but I hope that it can continue then in future as well. And the idea being, these days with contemporary music, it's impossible to say I'm going to form a string quartet or I'm going to form any fixed ensemble, because composers these days have very creative ideas about the worlds they want to create, and they need very specific instruments for it. So I decided to create it as like a shell, and then when projects are on hand, to approach the colleagues I know who enjoy the challenges that contemporary music places on the players to participate. And we'll see where this takes us, but I couldn't imagine a more spectacular debut for the ensemble than the project we're involved in now.
Yeah.
And to go to your question about does the content of the film feature in the way that I work with at the rehearsals? Well, I would first answer by saying the score, as Eugene hands it to me, is its own world, and it follows acoustic rules, and as a conductor with a score, my job is to take what is, let's say, an imagined and theoretical proposal, very specific, mind you, and take that and turn it into real sonic phenomena. And, when you do anything for the first time, there will be things that you'll discover maybe not quite as you imagined, and this will also be a process that I'll do with Eugene. But it's very much just about sorting out the material, playing it for the first time, experiencing it for the first time, to get back to that to the sensual side of things. I mean, it goes from being an idea into something sensual, which I think ties in very nicely in this cyclical idea of something existing in the mind space being transferred to the physical, and then back to the mind space, perhaps for future transfer to the physical. Music itself is a physical experience, you know. Air molecules are vibrating, strings are vibrating, and it's one of the most basic sensual experiences. So we do that, and we organise it, and you know, it's first of all, it's basic things like orientation. Everybody knows when they have to play what, etc. But then very quickly you establish a type of atmosphere that goes with those pieces, and that's the stage when you might say, listen, this bit we're working on now, there is an artist and working with some very delicate paper, or at this moment there is two girls are in a room together, and it's a very, again, you know, you can describe the atmosphere, and indeed that can be a very important suggestion to the musicians. Maybe there's a different way of approaching how they form their expression. So yes, it all ties in together, but it takes a certain order in the way that you approach it.
I really love how you brought it back to the body, which I think is deeply present in the once and future as well, right? That okay, no spoilers, but you know, at the end there is, I think, an invitation to come back to our bodies. And for Stanley, how you are approaching the piece is that you have already got the film, and then how does the composition, how does the live music layer on top of it? But for Anandi, as the librettist, did you have any input on, you know, some of the direction of the film or some of the rearrangement of the film?
In the sense that, of course, the narrative had to unfold together in progression of the film. But at the same time, I think there are very parallel narratives here, like Stanley also mentioned, in the sense that it was very interesting to have the guidance, and very important to have the guidance of Chris while I was writing this lyrics out. And with the freedom also, I could also understand better about the development of the character through the narrative. But at the same time, I feel like the film and the AI, they are talking parallelly about a lot of things, in the sense that the film shows so much about what was in a very tangible way, right? And the AI is largely trying to express how she is perceiving it, right? And there is a lot of comment on that. There is a lot of it is almost that like she's reverberating that reality. So it is more of a parallel sort of narrative, rather than in being absolutely in correlation to each other at every moment. But I think there are a lot of metaphors that tie the progressions of both narratives together. I think so many metaphors in very poetic ways does tie these two timelines in. And I don't think, of course, the lyrics is objectively constantly coming together with the film. It does not. But at the same time, it really, really just puts it together in a much, like in a large, like a bigger picture kind of way. Like, because at the end of the day, this is, of course, the bank, the memory bank that the AI has, right? It is the amalgamation. It is everything that has already happened, and largely the future is ellipses. The future is ellipses. There is not a page that one knows of what the future will bring. So I think the narrative is also retrospective in that sense. And yes, so yeah, I hope that
Yeah. I mean, I think what I'm hearing from you is that in a way they are acting as different harmonies that together create a different kind of chord, right? And the different threads then can shift around to create different kinds of melodies or contrapuntals. I'm probably using the term wrongly, but really just kind of playing with this idea of a journey that parallel journeys that shed light onto each other or contradict each other. And I think when I was looking at the screener for the Once and Future, that was something that came very strongly to me, that it wasn't about trying to latch onto any one particular moment or one particular thread, right? But really about just allowing the visuals and I imagine the music, when it all comes together, to just wash over you. I think we have time for one last question. And actually, I thought I would like to offer it up to both of you, whether there's anything you'd like to ask each other, since this is your first time meeting. Stanley, did you have anything you'd like to ask Anandi?
Well, I mean, I mentioned before, we at some point we're going to have an involved discussion about the specifics. At the moment, I have the score. I have we did a recording of some parts of it in Berlin, and Anandi already has done the vocal track to it. And I remember when I heard it, I was just blown away. I just thought, this is just so beautiful. It sort of like it gives the whole thing a certain amount of sense. And Anandi is reserved for very special moments in the film. It's not as if you'll be singing there the whole time. It comes at very at certain junctures in the film, and certainly as a type of apotheosis at the end, I think, also importantly. But we'll be talking about things like, okay, so there's like 7 minutes of film here, and you've got to start. What do you need? Do you need a note? Do you need and how will you know where you are? And what sort of signals do you? So we're going to develop a sign language so that she and I can be on the same page on stage, because my role, as I said before, I'm basically the operational manager when the film runs, to make sure everything sort of runs on time so people can concentrate on what they have to do, right? I shouldn't be getting in anybody's way, and certainly not attracting any attention. I'm there to help them get the coordination right. And so we'll talk about this, and I just know that Anandi has wonderful musical skills. She has a beautiful voice, and I really look forward to just interacting and exchanging and finding out actually about the way you work and what you'll need, and trying to complement that and give you the best support that I can, because that's my role.
Thank you so much already, Stanley, for that generous assurance, if I may say so, because you'll be interested to know that this is also my first time that I would be working with an orchestra to begin with, and the Berliner Philharmoniker Orchestra, no less. So I think there is so much here for me to discover. It's a whole new world of a whole new world of a whole new world for me, like as many worlds in absolute crazy continuation. So I think the most curious thing is to find out the best way to understand, and for me to understand and communicate. And the music is absolutely brilliant. And as Stanley said, it has a lot of spaces for me to improvise. And Eugene has been so very generous and kind with that also. And it is such an interesting process to have this come together for me. I'm probably speaking in such general terms, but it is as if somebody has opened a door to a dimension that I've never explored, but somehow I fit in, and it is for me to understand how to fit into that. And I'm very, very grateful for Stanley to have said what he did. It's going to be such a journey together.
Maybe I'd like to offer some of Stanley's own words from, I think, an earlier podcast that I heard you sharing on, where you spoke about how, once a musician steps into the world of the orchestra, it really opens up a whole other universe. And for me, the idea of crossing traditions, crossing spaces, crossing nations, crossing worlds is something that is a very strong theme of the once and future. And I'm really excited to hear that for both of you, it seems like your journey with the project has also allowed you to kind of step into that space and to experience that for yourself on a very visceral kind of level. Is there anything else either of you would like to share before we close for today?
I can only say that this project is interdisciplinary and is a form of human exchange on many levels. And if we take a look at the people involved in it, with Anandi and myself, I mean, I have Australian and Chinese background living in Germany, and then Eugene, who I think spans Hong Kong, Europe and England, and Topi from Finland and England, and managing projects around the world. Chris, of course, now, I mean, really in the film world, you could say a rising star, and then in the back, Roger Garcia is a very experienced film producer. I mean, this is already an example of international cooperation and a type of openness for cultures beyond what is normally presented, you know, in a narrow sense. You know, we've got the orchestra, we have the orchestral discipline, but it's put here together in an environment with so many other things. And I've also never worked with a singer like you, Anandi. That's why I'm absolutely thrilled, also to discover how it works and just to find what it is that you need and see how we can get that together. That's really, it's as much a voyage of discovery, I think, for us involved in the project as it is for the AI trying to come to terms with what it's going to be when she becomes flesh and blood again.
It's tremendous. I think it's just going to be a continuous journey of discovery, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be a part of it.
Lovely. Thank you so much for, being in this conversation, and I'm really looking forward to both of you finally meeting in person and getting to experience more of this arc and the journey of discovery.